Sure. There were a couple schools that were doing some pretty cool stuff, right? That I felt like they did the three things, that we talked about that were happening, but they also did some stuff that addressed these critiques. And one of those, I'll give, as an example. So there was a high school and they had some issues, again, about racial disproportionality in their discipline. They had some, other kind of issues that they wanted to tackle, right? And so they created, or they had an equity team, and they actually had students on the equity team. And so student voice became like this formalized committee at their school, student voice committee. And it became a really powerful mechanism of change that was really grounded in what the students were experiencing and, with a pretty explicit racial focus. And so it became a mechanism that they built and then now is kind of an ongoing practice of the school. And so what they do now once or twice a year is they send out a Google survey to as many students in the school to get it or take it as they can. And then they look at the data. And then what they would do is the student voice committee would then have focus groups with their peers about this data, where they'd say like, oh, a lot of students are saying this, like, let's get some qualitative, anecdotes and responses. And there wouldn't be a teacher in the room. The teacher would sit outside and make sure, things are cool, but also give them the privacy to have an honest and authentic conversation. And then so they gather some data qualitatively. And then the student voice committee meeting with the teachers on the equity committee, they're talking about it, they're looking at it, and they found some real things that they said, we need to share this with the entire teaching staff. And at first, the teachers on this equity committee were nervous to do that, where they said, well, like, this is going to be like a tough pill to swallow for some of our colleagues. And the students were like, oh, we'll share it. We'll run the PD, we'll do it. And so they had, I think it's still an ongoing thing. They have the PD, the students do the PD for the teachers once or twice a year. And they, put up the chart papers and they, share data from the survey and they share quotes and responses. And they have, the teachers do a gallery walk, they have them in discussion groups, and it's all facilitated by the students. And out of that, kind of that structure of student voice and student leadership, there were a number of outcomes, right? Like one of them was that a lot of the teachers realized, because they heard it in this, that they were being more punitive to Black students than white students. And they had all their rationalizations of like, oh, why that was. But when they heard from the data that white students were saying, I do the same thing as so-and-so, and you punish them and not me, they were like, it's so obvious that even the white students, like can see this, and so for the school leader there, she was a little disappointed the teachers had to hear it from the white students because Black students had been saying it all along. So she was, I think a little frustrated by that, but also at the same time, she was like, great, they're hearing it. If that's what it's going to take to get them to hear that we need to do something about how we interact with students, I'm all for it. And also that student voice committee also led to some changes in instructional pedagogy as well. And they realized, oh, we're relying too heavily on the high flyers, quote, quote, of this class, to lead conversations or whatnot. And so they realized, okay, we need to now do some more PD around scaffolding and differentiation, right? To make sure that teachers have a strong toolkit to make the classrooms, function in a way that works for everyone. So that student voice committee was a really powerful tool at that particular high school. And it really got them to start thinking about changing the relationships and their discipline practices as well as their teaching also.